In this video, I'll show you the easiest way, step-by-step process to paint a face. So if you're struggling with painting faces, this is going to help you a lot. I remember I used to struggle a lot with painting faces. I always wanted to paint faces, but I didn't know how to start. I didn't know specifically how to begin the process of painting a face. So you have to know that the first stage, the beginning stage of a painting, of a portrait, is the most important. That's literally going to be the foundation of everything else. And I'm going to show you an exercise. This exercise is called a value distillation. I'm going to tell you how to do it. And the reason why I love this exercise so much is because it kind of forces you to approach the painting in a super controlled way. You can't go wrong with this. So a value distillation is just basically simplifying the values of a photo. It's simplifying it in only 2 or 3 values. And the reason why this works so well is because if you look at a photo, if you look at a face, you'll notice that you have so many value transitions. You have so many transitions from dark to light. And you can imagine how simplifying those 100 transitions, because you have 100 values, that's like the value range. You can imagine how simplifying those 100 values into only 2 would make the entire process a lot easier, right? So what we're doing is simplifying those transitions into only 2 or 3. And then we can even keep adding more and more values. And that's gonna, like, if we keep adding more transitions, that's gonna add a lot more depth and it's gonna make it a lot more realistic and detailed. Now, let's actually try to do something with this exercise. So I'm going to start off by making this rectangle, this thumbnail, and this is where I'm going to start painting. And for this portrait, I'm going to do only 2 values. And doing 2 values is very simple. Even a beginner can do a 2-value distillation if you put some intention into it. And then once you feel comfortable enough with 2 values, you can add a 3rd value, and then you can even add a 4th value, and you can even start adding blending from that point. So what I'm doing basically is separating the dark areas from the light areas. So I'm blocking all the dark shapes. You can see how I kind of separated the dark shapes here on the left with the photo used to kind of show you. And we're trying to connect all the shapes together. You don't want to do a lot of detail. You want to simplify as much as you can. I know it can be tempting to show some extra information using lines, using thin shapes. But try to only use big shapes. Try to simplify it as much as you can. Because if you start using thin lines to represent things like the eyelashes or the hair, it's going to get a little distracting. So try to simplify it as much as you can. And a good way you can do it is by combining all the dark shapes together. So far, I think it's pretty easy. I think you can follow along to what I'm doing here. And I just want you to know that knowing how to do this exercise, being able to do this exercise is absolutely important. It's very essential. When I was a beginner, for some reason, I had this arrogant mindset and I used to think that I was above doing this exercise. I used to think this exercise was too easy, so I didn't have to do it because, it wasn't going to be any helpful. And I really, really don't want you to have this mindset, because beginner me was being arrogant about doing this exercise, even though I wasn't even able to paint a proper face. So if I'm making this video and I'm telling you this is the easiest way to make a painting a face, I'm telling you to trust me here, because I know for a fact this exercise is universally effective. Anyways, here I finished the portrait. You can see how the process is super easy. You can see exactly, what I did. And you also have to know that this stage of only using 2 values is the literal foundation of the painting, okay? If this initial stage doesn't work, if this doesn't look good like this simplified, it's not going to look good when you fully render it and you start adding more detail, okay? Matter of fact, this is such a controlled way to start a painting. Even a lot of traditional painters use this as a sketch. They do like an underpainting, which is basically a value distillation like the one I did. And then they start using this as guidelines or as a sketch to start painting over it. Okay, now let's make another portrait, but this time let's add another value. Let's add 3 values instead of 2. Here I'm going to do another photo study, and I'm going to do it the exact same way basically. But we're going to follow just one rule, one extra rule that is not really present on the previous 2-value study. And this rule is that we're going to save the highlights for last, okay? We have 3 values now. We have the darkest value, we have the lightest value, and we also have like an intermediate value, like a midtone. So we're going to start by using the darkest value and the intermediate value. And the lightest value that we have, we're going to be adding it last. We are currently doing a value exercise, and the reason why this exercise is so useful, so important, is because 100% of the times when somebody is struggling with a painting has to do with value. Unless you already you have the skill and stuff. But if you're a beginner, the reason why you're struggling with painting is because of the values. It's because your values don't look good. They don't look organized. You try blending, but you don't know how to do it in a controlled fashion, so it just looks horrible. If you can relate to this, that means you have to do this exercise more. It's also important that your proportions are accurate, so don't be afraid of liquefying things if you feel like they're looking a little wonky. And as you can see here, now that I painted the first two values, now I can add the lightest value. Now I can start adding the highlights. And now you can see how, now that I added this extra value, it has a lot more depth than the first study we did. And we basically just added another value transition. This is why we blend the values. This is why a lot of beginner artists are obsessed with blending and making everything super smooth, because adding more transitions will create the illusion of depth. So this is the way you want to approach blending. This is what we're doing right now. It's basically blending at a very simplified level. Now, what if I wanted to make this look more detailed and realistic? How would I do it? Well, in the portrait, we have 3 values. And in between each value, we have these lines, if you will. These lines kind of represent the transition of value. So what we're going to do is blend. We're going to apply some blending on these spots, on these lines. How do we start adding blending? There are 2 ways you can do it. You can do it manually with the round brush. Well, I'm using the round brush. So yeah, you can do it with opacity by color picking. This is the usual way I would do it. And then you can also use a blending tool. Most art programs have like a blending tool that you can use. So you just smudge the values and, it creates like a transition. So I'm going to do it both ways just to show you. And I'm going to start with the blending tool just because it's the one that looks prettier, in my opinion. It's the one that makes it look a lot more detailed. I want to show you that. And what's funny is that from this point, once you nailed the first 3 values, going from this to a fully rendered face, it's actually the easiest part. Why? Because we already built the foundation. So now we can very mindfully start adding the blending. And you want to do it on the right places, okay? You don't want to blend 100% of the edges. I know I tell you to blend the edges and the kind of lines, but there are going to be some edges that you don't really want to blend, or you don't want to blend that much. You want to leave a little bit more defined. And these are usually like the eye sockets or the nose, some areas of the lips, whatever. But the idea is that you observe the photo and you are able to tell what areas are smoother, and you add the blending on those areas specifically. Oh, and by the way, I just want to let you know that I'm doing art coaching. I'm doing art mentorships. And how this works is that you basically hire me to be your art teacher, your art coach. And I'll teach you everything that I know that will make you improve your art. And I'll guide you to the steps that you need to follow from being a beginner artist to being a way more advanced artist. So every single day, I'm giving you feedback on your art. You also have a bunch of video classes that I made. It's pretty cool. You can check it out. It's in the first link in the description. But anyways, back to this portrait. You can see how very quickly it went from looking super rough to looking super rendered and detailed. And funny enough, this is basically the easy step from go to this stage to this other stage. This is the easy part. The kind of annoying, the most difficult part is to put on all the values and having everything else to look accurate. And here on the right, I'm actually showing that you can also do this type of blending with the round brush or with any brush with opacity. So this is a little bit more complicated. It's a little bit more manual because I'm doing the blending manually. I'm color picking into the gradients and I'm making the transitions myself. But in the end, the result is kind of similar. So it might look a little bit more painterly. So yeah, this is basically all for the video. You can see here, you can compare the multiple stages of the portrait here. You can see how we went from only 2 values to 3 values, and then we added the blending. What you end up doing, what you're going to see a lot of artists do, and what I personally do now that I'm used to it, is that when you get to a certain point, you're able to do the blending as you go along, and you don't have to really wait until you make all the shapes to do the blending. So, you can just do it right after painting the shape. But of course, if you're watching this video, it's because you're kind of struggling. So don't do it that way. Just do as I told you, and you'll be fine. That was all for the video. If you want me to personally help you with your art, check the top link in the description. Goodbye.